And earlier this week, David Jones, the retailer, was embroiled in a social media furore over its casting of a young Sudanese Australian model in its latest advertising campaign.
17-year-old Adut Akesh Bior from Adelaide is part of a growing contingent of Sudanese Australian models who came to Australia as refugees and are finding success on the Australian and international fashion stage. Well, to tell us more about this and other fashion news, we're speaking with fashion journalist Paddy Huntington. Great to have you with us always, Paddy. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Now, this is something that we're seeing more and more. Of course, we had the wonderful Ajak Deng who, stormed the catwalks in 2010. We're seeing, yes, exactly, more and more Sudanese models, but not everyone's happy about that.
Interesting. I mean, Ajak has actually been in the David Jones before, but on the runway, and but this was the first time they've actually used a model in an advertising campaign, and I think it was the beauty campaign. And look, as far as I'm aware, there was just one person who made this sort of what looked to many people to be an outrageous comment that I don't know anyone who looks like this, and I can't relate to this woman. She did actually give her a backhanded compliment by saying how beautiful she was, but was pointing out that she didn't think she represented the general Australian population, which I guess is a fair point given that there's something like 20,000, well there were in the 2011 census.
Yeah, but hang on,
Sudanese
since
refugees.
when did the average catwalk model represent the Australian population?
That is exactly the point. I mean, you could turn to any model and say this doesn't represent the population.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but interesting, it was a sort of shock, and then David Jones did this sort of knee-jerk reaction, we're terribly sorry that you feel like that, we're going to pass this on to the marketing department. And of course, people pounced on that. They how dare David Jones apologise for the use of this model? So it blew up, and then after that, David Jones said, we're not apologising at all. We celebrate the diversity of the Australian population. And but the model has since come out and sort of said, this is not the first time this has happened, and I'm used to it. I'm just sort of, let it sort of move over, and it's the first time David Jones has used a Sudanese model in its advertising campaign, so it's a step forward.
Well, of course, she has since gone on to, since before the date, been overseas as far as doing international modelling and so on. I mean, we wouldn't be surprised to lose her to overseas completely, would we?
She's on an exclusive to the Yves Saint Laurent brand in Paris at the moment, and just sort of went from being a schoolgirl to being this international. She's still at school, and look, she's one of a number of young Sudanese girls. I mean, Ajak was sort of the first. I mean, there's been other international, like Alec Weck, very famous Sudanese model, but in Australia there's been a number of them. But just in the last sort of 18 months, they really have sort of come to the fore. And there was a new girl this year who I photographed backstage at Australian Fashion Week called Akima from Adelaide. And I didn't realise she'd been signed in March and by an agency in Adelaide. A couple of days later was signed worldwide by IMG. She's just been named the face of the Adelaide Fashion Festival. She's also from Adelaide. And Ducky Thott, who was, I think she came third in Australia's Next Top Models Cycle 8. She's in the Pirelli calendar, which is a very prestigious gig for any model. This year it's all black and it's themed on Alice in Wonderland, and she is here in the backstage at the Pirelli calendar shoot. She's the title role of Alice, and a couple of months ago, I'm not sure if you recall, there was a photo on Twitter that she put up, and it went viral. People wondered whether it was a Barbie doll or a real person, because she's so sort of perfect. Her face is just, I mean, they are extraordinary. I mean, they've got such incredibly long legs, these beautiful Sudanese girls. So they're, in many ways, the perfect fashion models.
Yeah, having been to Sudan myself, everyone is tall.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I mean, do you think perhaps we are seeing changes, more diversity, but the industry is still uncomfortable with how it manages that?
Well, I think, there's been a lot of criticism about the fact. In fact, Ajak came back to Australia last year and said she was quitting modelling because of the racism and the fact that there aren't opportunities. And I mean, since then, these other Australian girls have come through. I think it's definitely changing. The fact that, we had a do it in the David Jones campaign. And I mean, they are incredible models. And they might not be representative of the general public, but they definitely are representative of our multicultural society.
And that throws also to Indigenous models, and perhaps we're still seeing a lack of Indigenous models.
Well, David Jones, its latest campaign also has Charlie Fraser, who we talked about late last year. In fact, when we talked about the rise of the Black Australian model, and it's interesting to see this happen in the next sort of 8 months. But Charlie was also in the campaign. I mean, she's a lot fairer than these Sudanese girls are very dark. In fact, there was another Sudanese model in recent months who is particularly darker than even these girls, and she's being sort of hailed as a sort of black goddess, and said that she lost work as well because she didn't look like any other model. So it's a very interesting time, and they are amazing models, and I think it's great to see.
Well, we're also having a look back at the past, aren't we? Not just at the brave new future in modelling and fashion, but Christian Dior, we're celebrating the 70th anniversary of the company, and a special exhibition at the National Gallery in Victoria.
Absolutely, it's the biggest Dior show ever to be staged in Australia, and it's part of the 70th anniversary. And look, with a segue to David Jones, I mean, David Jones staged the very first full Christian Dior Haute Couture show outside Paris in 1948, if you can believe it. A buyer went over to Paris and sort of pulled this feat off. And then another 10 years later, about a month after his death, there was another show. So, it's to celebrate the 10th anniversary. It's one of several exhibitions. There's a very large one in Paris at the moment. And here we are. This is the David Jones show. And there's going to be over 140 garments, and people forget how revolutionary this new look, as it was called, back in 1947, because it came immediately after the war. France was in ruins. People were still, austerity measures, fabric restrictions, and there were, fashion shoots in the streets where the models had the clothes torn off them by outraged people.
Patty, we're just running out of time, but quickly, I do want to mention, I've seen on the streets, people starting to wear masks. Now, I assume that's because of pollution and the like, or perhaps, trying to protect themselves from other people having a cold, particularly in the middle of winter. It's become a fashion item.
But they can be fashionable, that's right.
It is. Well, I mean, Asians have worn sort of, surgical masks, and often that is, we had SARS and all this sort of stuff. But the rise of the anti-pollution mask, particularly cyclists are wearing them. I mean, we just this week in Sydney, we had the back burning and people complaining that there's not enough warnings and regulations. And look, last year there was a report that there were 14 premature deaths were triggered by the backburning in May, and I think the year before there was another report that there's some 3,000 deaths in Australia, premature deaths, due to air pollution, and that's costing $24 billion and blamed on a very antiquated warning system. So we're sort of seeing it across the world, obviously in Asia. I think the WHO has said that there's something like 2 billion children exposed to toxic fumes, and we're starting to see more. I mean, here's some sort of Western people in India wearing anti-pollution masks. They're not just surgical masks; they actually have filters and things. And we are seeing tie-ins with designers to put sort of fashion fronts on them. So.
It's a little bit alarming because of the health implications, but at least...
It's a bit confronting in some ways as well.
That's right. At least we can hope that we can do this in some sort of comfort and
style.
Yes, and style while we're at it. As always, Patty Huntington, wonderful to have you with us. Thank you so much.